Turning to Brexit, Mr. Speaker, I want to pay tribute to my right honourable friends, the members for Halton, Price and Howden, and Uxbridge and South Ruislip for their work over the last 2 years. We do not agree about the best way of delivering our shared commitment to honour the result of the referendum, but I want to recognise the work of the former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, for the work he did to establish a new department and steer through Parliament some of the most important legislation for generations. And similarly, to recognise the passion that the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting
Order! A very unseemly atmosphere. I want to hear about these important matters. And I think the House should. The Prime Minister.
Thank you. That the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting a global Britain to the world as we leave the European Union. And I'm also pleased to welcome my honourable friend, the member for Esher and Walton, as the new Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Mr. Speaker, on Friday at Chequers, the Cabinet agreed a comprehensive and ambitious proposal that provides a responsible and credible basis for progressing negotiations with the EU towards a new relationship after we leave on the 29th of March next year. It is a proposal that will take back control of our borders, our money and our laws. But do so in a way that protects jobs, allows us to strike new trade deals through an independent trade policy, and keeps our people safe and our union together. Before I set out the details of this proposal, I want to start by explaining why we are putting it forward. The negotiations so far have settled virtually all of the withdrawal agreement, and we've agreed an implementation period which will provide businesses and governments the time to prepare for our future relationship with the EU. But on the nature of that future relationship, the two models that are on offer from the EU are simply not acceptable. First, there is what is provided for in the European Council's guidelines from March this year. This amounts to a standard free trade agreement for Great Britain, with Northern Ireland carved off in the EU's customs union and parts of the single market, separated through a border in the Irish Sea from the UK's own internal market. No Prime Minister of our United Kingdom could ever accept this. It would be a profound betrayal of our precious union. And while I know some might propose instead a free trade agreement for the UK as a whole, this is not on the table because it would not allow us to meet our commitments under the Belfast Agreement that there should be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Secondly, there is what some people say is on offer from the EU, a model that is effectively membership of the European Economic Area, but going further in some places and remaining in the customs union for the whole of the UK. This would mean continued free movement, continued payment of vast sums every year to the EU for market access, a continued obligation to follow the vast bulk of EU law, no independent trade policy, with no ability to strike our own trade deals around the world. I firmly believe this would not honour the referendum result. So if the EU continues on this course, there is a serious risk it could lead to no deal. And this would most likely be a disorderly no deal, for without an agreement on our future relationship, I cannot see that this Parliament would approve the withdrawal agreement with the Northern Ireland Protocol and financial commitments, and without these commitments the EU wouldn't sign a withdrawal agreement. Mr. Speaker, a responsible government must prepare for a range of potential outcomes, including the possibility of no deal. Including the possibility of no deal. And given the short period remaining before the conclusion of negotiations, the Cabinet agreed on Friday that these preparations should be stepped up. But at the same time, we should recognise that such a disorderly no deal would have profound consequences for both the UK and the EU, and I believe that the UK deserves better. So the Cabinet agreed that we need to present the EU with a new model, evolving the position that I had set out in my Mansion House speech so that we can accelerate negotiations over the summer, secure that new relationship in the autumn, pass the withdrawal and implementation bill and leave the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. Mr. Speaker, the friction-free movement of goods is the only way to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. And it is the only way to protect the uniquely integrated supply chains and just-in-time processes on which millions of jobs and livelihoods depend. So at the heart of our proposal is a UK-EU free trade area which will avoid the need for customs and regulatory checks at the border and protect those supply chains. To achieve this requires 4 steps. First, a commitment to maintaining a common rulebook for industrial goods and agricultural products. To deliver this, the UK would make an upfront, sovereign choice to commit to ongoing harmonisation with EU rules on goods, covering only those necessary to provide for frictionless trade at the border. This would not cover services, because this is not necessary to ensure free flow at the border, and it would not include the common agricultural and fisheries policies, which the UK will leave when we leave the EU. The regulations that are covered are relatively stable and are supported by a large share of our manufacturing businesses. And we would continue to play a strong role in shaping the European and international standards that underpin them. And there would be a parliamentary lock on all new rules and regulations, because when we leave the EU, we will end the direct effect of EU law in the UK. All laws in the UK will be passed in Westminster, Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast. Our Parliament would have the sovereign ability to reject any proposals if it so chose, recognising that there will be consequences, including for market access, if we chose a different approach from the EU. Second, we'll ensure a fair trading environment. So under our proposal, the UK and the EU would incorporate strong reciprocal commitments relating to state aid. We'll establish cooperative arrangements between regulators on competition, and we will commit to maintaining high regulatory standards for the environment, climate change, social and employment, and consumer protection. Third, we would need a joint institutional framework to provide for the consistent interpretation and application of UK-EU agreements by both parties. This will be done in the UK by UK courts and in the EU by EU courts, with due regard paid to EU case law in areas where the UK continued to apply a common rulebook. This framework would also provide a robust and appropriate means for the resolution of disputes, including through the establishment of a joint committee of representatives from the UK and the EU. It would respect the autonomy of the UK and the EU's legal orders and be based on the fundamental principle that the court of one party cannot resolve disputes between the two. Fourth, the Cabinet also agreed to put forward a new business-friendly customs model, a facilitated customs arrangement. This would remove the need for customs checks and controls between the UK and the EU, because we would operate as if a combined customs territory. Crucially, it would also allow the UK to pursue an independent trade policy. The UK would apply the UK's tariffs and trade policy for goods intended for the UK, and the EU's tariffs and trade policy for goods intended for the EU. 96% of businesses would be able to pay the correct tariff or no tariff at the UK border, so there would be no additional burdens for them compared to the status quo, and they will be able to benefit from the new trade deals that we will strike. In addition, we will also bring forward new technology to make our customs systems as smooth as possible for those businesses who trade with the rest of the world. Some have suggested that under this arrangement the UK would not be able to do trade deals. They are wrong. When we have left the EU, the UK will have our own independent trade policy, with our own seat at the World Trade Organization and the ability to set tariffs for our trade with the rest of the world. We will be able to pursue trade agreements with key partners, and on Friday, the Cabinet agreed that we would consider seeking accession to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Mr. Speaker, our Brexit plan for Britain respects what we have heard from businesses about how they want to trade with the EU after we leave, and will ensure we are best placed to capitalise on the industries of the future in line with our modern industrial strategy. Finally, as I've set out in this House before, our proposal also includes a far-reaching security partnership that will ensure continued close cooperation with our allies across Europe while enabling us to operate an independent foreign and defence policy. So this is not just a plan that is good for British jobs, but good for the safety and security of our people at home and in Europe too. Some have asked whether this proposal is consistent with the commitments made in the Conservative manifesto. It is. The manifesto said that, and I quote, "As we leave the European Union, we will no longer be members of the single market or customs union, but we will seek a deep and special partnership, including a comprehensive free trade and customs agreement," and that is exactly what the proposal agreed by the Cabinet seeks to achieve. What we are proposing is challenging for the EU. It requires them... It requires them to think again, to look beyond the positions they've taken so far, and agree a new and fair balance of rights and obligations. Because that is the only way to meet our commitments to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland without damaging the constitutional integrity of the UK and while respecting the result of the referendum. It is a balance that reflects the links we've established over the last 40 years as some of the world's largest economies and security partners. It is a bold proposal that we will set out more fully in a white paper on Thursday, and we now expect the EU to engage seriously with the detail and to intensify negotiations over the summer so that we can get the future relationship I firmly believe is in all our interests. In the 2 years since the referendum, we have had a spirited national debate with robust views echoing around the Cabinet table as they have on breakfast tables up and down the country. Over that time, I've listened to every possible idea and every possible version of Brexit. Mr. Speaker, this is the right Brexit, leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. A complete end to free movement, taking back control of our borders. An end to the jurisdiction of the CJEU in the UK, restoring the supremacy of British courts. No more sending vast sums of money each year to the EU. Instead, a Brexit dividend to spend on domestic priorities like our long-term plan for the NHS. Flexibility on services where the UK is world-leading. No hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland or between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. A parliamentary lock on all new rules and regulations. Leaving the common agricultural policy and the common fisheries policy. The freedom to strike new trade deals around the world. An independent foreign and defence policy, but not the most distant relationship possible with our neighbours and friends, a new deep and special partnership, frictionless trade in goods, shared commitments to high standards so that together we continue to promote open and fair trade, and continued security cooperation to keep our people safe. This is the Brexit that is in our national interest. It is the Brexit that will deliver on the democratic decision of the British people. It is the right Brexit deal for Britain, and I commend this statement to the House.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of this statement and to share her condolences to the friends and family of Dawn Sturgis. We're over 2 years on from the referendum. 2 years of sound bites, indecision and cabinet infighting. Culminating in a series of wasted opportunities, with more and more people losing faith that this government is capable of delivering a good Brexit deal, and that is just within her own cabinet. 2 years on from the referendum, 16 months on from Article 50 being triggered, it's only this weekend that the Cabinet managed to agree a negotiating position among itself. And that illusion lasted 48 hours. There are now only a few months left until these negotiations are supposed to conclude. We have a crisis in government. 2 Secretaries of State have resigned, and still we are no clearer on what future relationship with our nearest neighbours and biggest partners will look like. Workers and businesses deserve better than this. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, this government is not capable of securing a deal to protect the economy, jobs and living standards. It is clear this government cannot secure a good deal for Britain.
That's right.
On Friday, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was so proud of her Brexit deal, she wrote to her MPs to declare, collective cabinet responsibility is now fully restored. While the Environment Secretary added his own words and said, one of the things about this compromise is that it unites the cabinet. The Chequers compromise took 2 years to reach and just 2 days to unravel. Mr. Speaker, how can anyone have faith in the Prime Minister getting a good deal with 27 European Union governments when she can't even broker a deal within her own cabinet? To be fair, and I want to be fair to the former Brexit Secretary and the former Foreign Secretary, I think they would have resigned on the spot on Friday. But they were faced with a very long walk, no phone, and due to government cuts, no bus service either. So, I think they were probably wise to hang on for a couple of days so they can get a lift home in a government car. I also, Mr. Speaker, want to congratulate the honourable member for Esher and Walton on his appointment as the Secretary of State. He now becomes our chief negotiator on an issue that could not be more important or more urgent. But this new Secretary of State is on record as wanting to tear up people's rights. He said, and I quote, "I don't support the Human Rights Act. Leaving the European Union would present enormous opportunities to ease the regulatory burden on employers." And he is the one negotiating, apparently on behalf of this government in Europe. Mr. Speaker, this mess is all of the Prime Minister's own making. For too long, she spent more time negotiating the divisions in her party than she is putting any focus on the needs of our economy. The Prime Minister postured with red line after red line, and now, as reality bites, she's backsliding on every one of them. We were also given commitments that this government would achieve the exact same benefits and free and frictionless trade with the EU. Now those red lines are fading, and the team the Prime Minister appointed to secure this deal for our country have jumped the sinking ship. Far from strong and stable, there are ministers overboard and the ship is listing, all at the worst possible time. Mr. Speaker, if we look at the Prime Minister's proposals for the long-delayed White Paper, this is not a comprehensive plan for jobs in Britain and the economy the people of this country deserve. These proposals stop well short of a comprehensive customs union, something trade unions and manufacturers have been demanding. Instead, they float a complex plan that has already been derided by her own cabinet members as bureaucratic and unwieldy. The agreement contains no plan to protect our service industry, no plan to prevent a hard border in Northern Ireland, and also put forward the idea of regulatory flexibility, which we all know, Mr. Speaker, regulatory flexibility is a code for deregulation of our economy. The government's proposals will lead to British workplace rights, consumer rights, food safety standards and environmental protections falling behind EU standards over time. And none of this has even been tested in negotiations. The Chequers Agreement now stands as a shattered truce, a sticking plaster over the cavernous cracks in this government. The future of jobs and investment are now at stake. Those jobs and that investment, are not a subplot in the Tory party's civil war. And And at such a crucial time for our country, in these vital negotiations, we need a government that is capable of governing and negotiating for Britain. For the good of this country and its people, the government needs to get its act together and do it quickly. And if it can't, make way for those who can.
Mr. Speaker, I know the right honourable gentleman has been in this House for quite a long time, and he will have heard many statements, and the normal response to a statement is actually to ask some questions. I don't think there are any questions anywhere in that, but nevertheless, I will...
members on both sides of the House should try to calm down. There's a long way to go, and as is my usual custom, I would hope to be able to call everybody who wants to ask a question, so people don't need to chunter from their seats when they can speak on their feet. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just on I will comment on a few of the points that the right honourable gentleman made. He talked about removing standards and lower standards in a number of areas, including employment. As I said in my statement, we will commit to maintaining high regulatory standards for the environment, climate change, social and employment, and consumer protection. He said there was no plan in what I had said to ensure there was no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. In fact, the very opposite. This plan delivers the commitment for no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. At the very beginning of his response, the right honourable gentleman thanked me for early sight of my statement. It's just a pity he obviously didn't bother to read it. Can I also say... He says that this is 2 years on. This is the right honourable gentleman who said immediately after the referendum decision in 2016 that we should have triggered Article 50 immediately with no preparation whatsoever. He talks about delivery. Well, I might remind him that we delivered the joint report in December, we delivered the implementation plan in March, and now we stand ready to deliver on Brexit for the British people with the negotiations that we're about to enter into. He talks about resignations. Can I just remind him, I think he's had 103 resignations from his front bench. So I'll take no lectures from the right honourable gentleman. And when it comes to delivering on a strong economy, on jobs for the future, the one party that would never deliver a strong economy is the Labour Party, whose economic policies would lead to a run on the pound, capital flight, and the loss of jobs for working people up and down this country.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, whatever else one's view of this particular plan my right honourable friend has been talking about, I urge her not to accept any single recommendations from the leader opposite, as nobody else in his party does. Can I then, however, urge her to answer this particular question? As she lays this plan in front of the European Union Commission and proceeds on negotiations, could she tell me whether she believes that there will be any concessions offered to them or none?
Say to my right honourable friend, this is the plan that we believe is going to deliver on Brexit for the British people, but do so in a way that gives us a smooth and orderly Brexit and ensures that we can actually do all the things that we want to do in terms of trade policies around the rest of the world and the commitments we've made to Northern Ireland. When the White Paper is published on Thursday, my right honourable friend will see that there are a number of areas, such as in participation in certain agencies, where we're proposing a way forward, and of course there will need to be negotiations on that way forward. But this is the plan that I believe both delivers on Brexit for the British people, but does so in a way that protects jobs and makes sure that we have a smooth and orderly Brexit.
Ian Blackford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of her statement, and can I share with her the remarks that she's made regarding Don Sturgis, and she knows the commitment that we have on this side of the chamber to work with her when it's important on matters of national security. I should start by congratulating the departing Cabinet Secretary for leaving the EU for the whole 4 hours that he spent negotiating in Brussels during his time, and wish all the luck in his world to his replacement. He's going to need it. And then there's the departing Foreign Secretary. Mr. Speaker, he should not have been allowed to resign. He should have been sacked for being a national embarrassment. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's proposals are at best represent a starting point, a cherry-picking starting point. It is hard to believe that it's taken the Prime Minister 2 years to put together a proposal. 2 years to put together a proposal and 2 days for our Cabinet to fall apart. There is, I believe, a majority in the House of Commons for staying in the single market and the customs union. Will the Prime Minister work with the rest of us to make sure that we can deliver on staying in the customs union and the single market, to deliver what is in the best interest of all our people? Will she stop kowtowing to our hard Brexiteers who are prepared to accept economic self-harm and the loss of jobs? Will she recognise that she now has to take on her extreme Brexiteers and work in the national interest of all the nations of the United Kingdom? The Prime Minister's proposal of a facilitated customs arrangement has been called by one senior EU official as the fudge of the century. The response of EU negotiators has been to see if the proposals are workable and realistic. Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't hold my breath. The Prime Minister has again today in her Telegraph piece noted that the UK Government prepares to prepare for a no deal. Mr. Speaker, that is simply outrageous. To put the economy and jobs in such peril is a complete failure of leadership. Mr. Speaker, the absolute crisis which has engulfed the Conservative Party over the last 17 hours is a national embarrassment. As the UK inches closer to the cliff edge scenario, we see a government in chaos, a Prime Minister struggling to lead her party, never mind her government, and 7 resignations since the elections a year ago. The Prime Minister must see sense and accept the mounting evidence against a hard Brexit raised by opposition parties, the business community and the devolved administrations. Will she work with the rest of us to stay in the customs union and the single market to protect jobs and ensure prosperity?
The Right Honourable Gentleman commented on the preparations for no deal. It is entirely right and proper for this government to make preparations for every eventuality because we are going into a negotiation. And it is right that we step up our preparations for no deal to ensure that we are able to deal with whatever comes out at the end of these negotiations. But the key question which the Right Honourable Gentleman asked, and he asked it twice, was would I work with people across this House to stay in the single market and in the customs union? The answer is an absolute, unequivocal no. We are leaving the single market and we are leaving the customs union.
Sir William Cash. How does my right honourable friend reconcile the Chequers statement with the recent repeal of the 1972 Act under the Withdrawal Act, and also with including the European Court of Justice and with democratic self-government in this country?
Can I say to my honourable friend that we have indeed, as he said in the EU Withdrawal Act, repealed the European Communities Act. But we have also ensured that we will take into UK law, at the point at which we leave the European Union, EU law, such that we see a smooth and orderly Brexit. In the future, the European Court of Justice will not have jurisdiction over the United Kingdom. And this Parliament will make sovereign decisions. This Parliament will first of all make a sovereign decision when the withdrawal, the meaningful vote and the withdrawal and implementation bills are brought before this House as to whether this Parliament is willing to accept the deal that has been negotiated. And thereafter, it will be up to this Parliament to decide whether it agrees with any changes in rules or any laws that this Parliament wants to pass. That is the sovereignty, taking back laws, taking back control of our laws. That is what I believe people want, and that is what we will do.
Sir Vincent Cable.
First of all, congratulate the Prime Minister for effectively killing off the United States-UK trade agreement by agreeing to retain EU regulatory convergence, which of course the Americans cannot accept. But could I also echo the call she's just heard to say that now she's lost the support of her Brexit fundamentalists, now is the time to have a national consensus, the majority in the House, who do support our retaining membership of the customs union and the single market, the original common market, whatever name and label she wants to attach to it.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he refers, as the leader of the SNP did, to staying in the single market and staying in the customs union. We will not be staying in the single market. We will not be staying in the customs union. To do those would involve us keeping free movement, and that would not be keeping faith with the vote of the British people. There will be an end to free movement from the European Union into this country as a result of us leaving the European Union.
Anna Salisbury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, can I commend the Prime Minister for this plan, and in particular, can I congratulate her on her leadership in the last few days? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said that she would listen to business, and she clearly has listened to business. However, there are concerns that there are no details about the government's plan for services. What more detail can we expect to hear in the forthcoming white paper?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, there will be more detail in the forthcoming white paper, but the point about services is that for a variety of reasons, not least because this is an important sector for the United Kingdom, we believe it is important to maintain more flexibility in how we're dealing with services. On the goods side, industrial goods side, businesses are very clear that they would continue to meet those EU rules regardless of the position that the government took, because they want to continue to export into the European Union. On services, we want to be free to ensure that we are able to put in place what we believe is necessary to maintain our key position in services, not least on the financial services, where the global financial centre of the City of London needs to be maintained into the future, and we will continue to do that.
Mr. Hilary Benn.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister welcomed the new Secretary of State to his post. Can I join her in doing so and say that we look forward to seeing him appearing before the Select Committee very soon indeed.
You better call the meeting quickly.
The government has indicated that the facilitated customs arrangement, even assuming that the EU were to agree to it, a question about which there must be a great deal of doubt, would only be fully operational by the time of the next general election in 2022. Will the Prime Minister therefore now confirm to the House that in the light of that, the current transitional arrangement, which expires in December 2020, is inevitably going to have to be extended?
No.
John Redwood.
The Prime Minister is right to reaffirm that we are taking back control of our laws, our money and our borders, and I fully support that. But will she clear away the ambiguity or contradictions in the Chequers statement, which implies we would give the ECJ powers, we might pay money to trade, and we might accept their laws, and we might have their migration policy?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I'm sure that he has read the Chequers statement very carefully, but actually the Chequers statement did not say that. We will be ending free movement, as in any trade agreement which we would strike with any country around the world or with any group of countries around the world. There will be Mode 4 provisions on mobility of investors and businesses, but we will be able to set our own immigration laws, our own immigration rules for people coming here from the European Union. And we will be able to continue to to set our own laws in the future. As regards the European Court of Justice, it is not the case that the European Court of Justice will have jurisdiction in the United Kingdom. It will not. Businesses and individuals here in the United Kingdom will not be able to take cases to the European Court of Justice. Matters here in the UK will be determined by the UK courts.
Vic Cooper.
The Prime Minister's plan is still a fudge on immigration, on the Court of Justice and on the Customs Facilitated Partnership Maximum Arrangement, which nobody understands what it is. She's kept trying to pander to different parts of the Conservative Party, and today has shown it just isn't working. So will she instead put a plan for negotiations to the whole House of Commons for approval? Because when she's in such a mess, she cannot just keep standing there saying nothing has changed, nothing has changed. It has.
Can I say to the Right Honourable Lady, actually, I didn't say nothing has changed. I said that our position had evolved. We have set out more details in our position, and I believe that this is the position that is absolutely right for the United Kingdom. This is the best Brexit deal for Britain that gives us delivery on Brexit, protects jobs, ensures that we maintain our commitment to Northern Ireland in relation to the border, and that we can have a smooth and orderly Brexit.
Yes, Sir Patrick McLaughlin.
The Prime Minister is not dealing with the theory of leaving the European Union. She's dealing with the practice of leaving the European Union. Can she assure me that the Chequers Agreement allows the situation to continue that has seen the United Kingdom get more inward investment over the last 30 years than any over both parties than we could have possibly anticipated, and that is good news for the future of the engineering industry in our country, as well as all those other jobs that are so reliant on those industries.
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. We have seen good figures for foreign direct investment into the UK, supporting jobs in the United Kingdom. That will continue in the future. I believe that the plan which I have set out, with its clear momentum for frictionless trade with the European Union, while giving us the freedom to strike trade deals around the world, will be one that is welcomed by businesses and investors, and we will see more investment and more jobs in the UK.
Mr. Nigel Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Among the matters agreed in the Chequers communique, there was reference, of course, to the continuing obligation of the government to the backstop arrangement, so-called. Can the Prime Minister make it very, very clear? I've heard her very clear statement about the main deal as far as the Union is concerned. I welcome that. But can't she make it very clear that as far as the backstop is concerned, she stands by her rejection of the EU's legal interpretation, and that there will be no constitutional, political or regulatory differences between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom in the backstop?
What can I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman? As he has invited me to do, I'm happy to say that I continue to reject the protocol proposal, the so-called backstop that was put forward by the European Union, by the European Commission earlier in this year. The fact that that would have effectively carved Northern Ireland out away from the rest of the United Kingdom and kept Northern Ireland in the customs union and most of the single market would have meant that border down the Irish Sea. That is completely unacceptable to the government of the United Kingdom.
Nicky Morgan.
Delivering a referendum result was always going to involve a series of compromises and trade-offs. I want to support the position that the Prime Minister achieved with the Cabinet on Friday at Chequers, which absolutely puts business and jobs at the heart of any Brexit deal. That is in the national interest. And I think that the Prime Minister has the vast majority of the country behind her in delivering a Brexit in the national interest. Is she able to say when we expect perhaps to hear the initial reaction from the European Union after publication of the White Paper on Thursday?
Well, can I say to my right honourable friend that I've had conversations with a number of European leaders over recent days, and the indication is that they do feel that this is a proposal that can ensure that we move the negotiations on and move those negotiations on at pace. I will be seeing a number of European leaders over the next couple of days. We're hosting the Western Balkans Summit tomorrow, for example, and then obviously there is the NATO Summit. I believe this is a plan which is good for the United Kingdom, and I believe it's a plan which the European Union will see will lead to a deep and special partnership that will be in both our interests.
Then Bradshaw.
I believe the Prime Minister to be a rational human being. So why doesn't she save herself, us and the country a great deal of misery and grief and put the option inexplicably ruled out at Chequers, the EEA plus option, to this House in a free vote?
Say to the right honourable gentleman, as I indicated in the statement that I made, the reason that I do not think that the EEA plus option is right for the United Kingdom is because it does not deliver on the vote of the British people. That is our duty. It is our job as a government to deliver the Brexit that the British people voted for.
Mr. Rowan Patterson.
Speaker, the announcement that the government is preparing for a no deal, which is an inaccurate term for moving to world trade terms, on which we trade with the vast majority of countries of the world, is very welcome and sensible. Given the intransigence and the churlishness with which the EU has welcomed her very generous offer so far, what is the date by which she judges it's a drop-dead moment to state that the talks are not progressing and that we will definitely be going to world trade terms?
I'm sure my right honourable friend has been in sufficient number of negotiations to know that actually it is not sensible to try to put a date on it in the way that he has, these matters in the way that he has said. We have received a positive reaction so far to the proposals we've put forward. We will go into intense and pacey negotiations with the European Union. What I'm clear about is that when this House comes to look at the Withdrawal Agreement and Implementation Bill, it needs to have sufficient detail about the future relationship to be able to make that proper judgment.
Angela Eagle.
Mr. Speaker, the oddly named Chequers Agreement fell apart after a weekend and is now the Chequers Disagreement as her cabinet disintegrates before our eyes. So can she tell this House how on earth she's going to persuade the European Union to agree to her disagreement when her own cabinet don't agree with it?
I say to the honourable lady that we have put forward the position of the UK government that has been received by the European Union as something on which there can be negotiations in the future, and we will go into those negotiations determined to deliver the best deal for Britain.
Mr. Damien Green.
Yeah. What matters even more than the agreement reached at Chequers is the eventual agreement that this country will reach with the European Union. And what matters about that is that it promotes jobs and prosperity by helping British business. Can the Prime Minister assure the House that in the details of what we will see in the White Paper on Thursday will be a clear commitment to as free trade as possible across the borders of Britain with the European Union to preserve the jobs and prosperity for the future of this country?
Well, I can assure my right honourable friend that maintaining that free trade across the borders between the United Kingdom and the European Union is important. That's why we have always said that we want as frictionless trade as possible with the EU. The plan I've put forward that the government will set out in the White Paper later this week will show how we can do exactly that, maintain those jobs, but also have the freedom to increase our prosperity with trade deals around the rest of the world.
Emma Reynolds.
Have any European leaders agreed to let the UK collect tariffs on their behalf?
No. We are putting forward the facilitated customs arrangement for the future. We're putting that forward as part of the negotiations for the plan for the future relationship.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Speaker, can I say to my right honourable friend how much we're looking forward to the publication of the White Paper on Thursday? Can she also undertake to publish the White Paper that was set aside, the White Paper months in drafting by DEX-EU under the leadership of my right honourable friend, the member for Halston, Price and Howden?
Can I say to my honourable friend that the White Paper we publish on Thursday will be based on the work that has been done by DEX-EU over recent weeks and will of course reflect the decision that was taken by the Cabinet on Friday.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister says that under her plan we won't be subject to the jurisdiction of the Court of Justice. But the Chequers statement says that our courts will pay due regard to its case law and make joint references for rulings which will presumably be binding. The big difference is that after the 29th of March, there will be no Scottish judge and no English judge on the Court of Justice. Won't this be the very definition of being subject to the jurisdiction of a foreign court which her Brexiteers so opposed?
No, can I say to the honourable lady, and I understand that the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster actually has commented on this in a question that she asked in another meeting. Can I say to her that we will not be under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice? That is one of the things that people voted for, and we will deliver.
Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister said that we would not be hindered from doing trade deals. But at a briefing given by 10 Downing Street, it was explained that in signing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there would have to be a carve-out because our obligation to follow the common rule book. Will my right honourable friend explain what obstacles there will be to trade and how this will work?
Can I say to my honourable friend, there are issues which we would look at in any circumstances as the United Kingdom in relation to standards and the way in which we wish to operate, which could lead to us not being able to undertake all the commitments that somebody might want in a free trade deal. We could tear up all our regulatory standards, but I don't actually think that's what we should do, and I don't think that's what this House would want us to do, and I don't think it's what the public would want us to do. So as we go forward, we will be making those trade deals. We specifically looked at whether the plan that we were putting forward would enable us to accede to the CPTPP, and it would.
Mr. Frankfield.
May I thank the Prime Minister for her statement. Might I join with my right honourable friend in welcoming the Brexit Secretary to his place? And might I ask that they find time to visit the elected political leaders of Europe to seek support for this plan rather than just depend on the bureaucrats in Brussels?
The right honourable gentleman is absolutely right. I myself am speaking to elected leaders across Europe. My honourable friend, the incoming Brexit Secretary, will be also out and around Europe, talking not just to leaders, but actually to politicians across Europe and, of course, in the European Parliament about the plan that we propose.
Ah, yes, a Lincolnshire knight, I think. Sir Edward Lee.
The EU says they won't tolerate cherry picking, but what I fear is that we've picked the wrong cherry for this reason, that we, by accepting a common rule book in goods, are locking ourselves into a sclerotic structure where the EU has an overwhelming trading surplus. Will this not severely constrain our ability to make our business more competitive and to undertake free trade deals? So the Brexit will no longer mean Brexit, it will mean the Commission, where we will have no vote, regulating our business forever.
No, can I say to my honourable friend that the position that he's set out is not the position for the future. I've been very clear that Parliament will be able to take these decisions about rules in the future. But the reality is, somebody said earlier that I'm dealing not with the theory, but the reality and the practicality of Brexit. The practicality of Brexit is that our businesses who want to export to the European Union will continue to operate to the European Union's rule book in industrial goods. Just as, when we sign trade deals with other parts of the world, we will need to ensure that both sides are able to operate to the rules that are appropriate there. So businesses will continue to apply these rules regardless. By operating in this way, what we are able to do is to ensure that frictionless border between the UK and the EU, a frictionless border which is important to deliver on our commitments for Northern Ireland while maintaining the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom, and important in ensuring that we maintain the jobs that rely on the integrated supply chains that have grown up over decades.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has proposed a free trade area for goods, but the fact is our services sectors have been left out and left behind by this government. Tech UK, which represents 700 firms that employ over 700,000 workers in the technology sector, has said that a deal such as that she has proposed will reduce access to EU markets, will be confusing for consumers and add to complexity for business. Why is she ignoring these services businesses which make up most of the British economy?
This is not about ignoring services businesses. This is about seeing that services is one of the areas where we have great opportunities in our trade deals around the rest of the world. It is also about recognising the importance and the significance in financial services of the City of London, and the importance of ensuring that we're able to have regulatory cooperation, but the freedom to be flexible in these areas.
Mr. Peter Bone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday mornings, I lead the listening team in Wellingborough. We have an hour's meeting when we talk about national and local politics, and then we go out and campaign for 2 hours. This week, the activists were so disappointed about what had happened at Chequers.
What did you tell them?
They were betrayed. They said they were betrayed, and they asked why. They asked why do we go out each and every Saturday to support the Conservative Party, gets MPs elected, and sir, for the first time in over 10 years, that group refused to go out and campaign. What would the Prime Minister say to them?
Can I say to my honourable friend, first of all, that I'm very sorry that his activists did not feel able to go out and campaign. I would hope that they would campaign for their excellent Member of Parliament and be willing to support him on the doorsteps. This is not a betrayal. We will end free movement. We will end the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. We will stop sending vast sums of money to the European Union every year. We will come out of the common agricultural policy. We will come out of the common fisheries policy. I believe, though, that is what people voted for when they voted to leave, and we will deliver in faith with the British people.
Alison McGovern.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents who work at Airbus, Vauxhall Motors, Jaguar Land Rover, Unilever and many other parts of our modern manufacturing supply chain have had their voice heard, but they need to be heard more, because it's not just what was in the Chequers statement that they need. So will the Prime Minister say, when will she go further and accept that we need to include more in this deal and we need to be part of the internal market of the European Union?
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, we're very clear that we won't be members of the single market. We won't be members of the single market because of the full set of requirements that brings, including the free movement. She refers to Vauxhall. Of course, Vauxhall have announced that it will invest in a new manufacturing platform and boost production at its commercial vehicle plant in Luton. That will safeguard 1,400 jobs. There have been other positive announcements from the automotive sector, but we have recognised the integrated supply chains, and we've recognised the need for that frictionless trade across the border, and that's what this plan delivers.
Sir Nicholas Soames.
May I give the Prime Minister a message from mid-Sussex? To this end, that despite the slings and arrows inevitably, will she stick to her guns to deliver a Brexit that's in line with the interests of our people, of their prosperity and their security?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that that is exactly the aim of myself and this government, to deliver a Brexit that is smooth and orderly, that maintains the prosperity of this country, that indeed enables it to be enhanced in the future, but also maintains our important security cooperation for the safety and security of citizens.
Mr. David Lammy.
When the Prime Minister took office, she said she wanted to bring the country back together, and I believe that she had the will of most people in this House and the country. 69% of British people now think Brexit is going badly. Her cabinet is horribly split. The government is split. The nation is more divided than ever. Our people will be poorer as a consequence of this deal that leaves out services. Will she now commit to give the people a second vote on this deal?
No, I will not commit to do that. And the reason I will not commit to do that is because the British people voted. This House, this Parliament gave the British people the vote. They made their choice, and they want their government to deliver on that choice. And I think, given that 80% of people at the last election voted for parties which were committed to delivering Brexit, that it's time the Labour Party ruled out a second referendum.
Andrea Jenkins.
Mr. Speaker, my constituency voted 60% to leave the EU. Within 48 hours of the Prime Minister's statement on Friday, I received over 300 emails, disheartened, dismayed and telling me that democracy is dead. Can the Prime Minister tell the House How does she plan to restore public faith to my constituents that this is not a sellout?
Can I say to my honourable friend that I think people across the country, from wherever they voted to leave, and I understand she has received comments not just from her constituents on this matter, or people from across the country, wherever they voted to leave, wanted to see an end to free movement. We will deliver that. They wanted us to stop sending vast amounts of money to the EU every year. We will deliver that. They wanted us to end the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice in the UK. We will deliver that. They wanted to come out of the common agricultural policy. We will deliver that. They wanted to come out of the common fisheries policy. We will deliver that. We will deliver Brexit that people voted for, but we will do so in a way that ensures we protect jobs, maintain our commitments to the precious United Kingdom, the Union of the United Kingdom, and ensure we can go out and do trade deals around the west of the world, which will bring jobs to her constituency and others.
Stephen Doughty. Mr. Speaker, the new Brexit Secretary has proudly advocated no deal, claiming we would thrive. He suggested we might have to abandon the common travel area with Ireland. He suggested scrapping the Working Time Directive. And in 2013, he voted against crucial police and justice cooperation across Europe that is going to be key to any security treaty. Are those now government policy? And if not, why did she appoint him?
The government policy is very clear. I've set it out this afternoon. The further details will be seen in the White Paper, and the Brexit Secretary looks forward to delivering on that government policy.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Will she assure me that we will not charge the EU for access to our markets any more than we'd expect to be charged?
Well, can I say to my right honourable friend that I think one of the key features of the facilitated customs arrangement, which people may not have seen, is that we would, of course, recognise that the European Union would be effectively taking tariffs for UK goods that would enter other European Union countries to come to the United Kingdom, and we would make sure that that was reflected in the arrangements that are made in relation to the facilitated customs arrangement.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
The Welsh Affairs Select Committee today published a report recommending continued membership of the single market and the customs union on the basis of evidence received about agriculture. If whoever is in government doesn't come to the same conclusion, we will all wake up on March the 30th without a functioning government and without a functioning deal. For all our sakes, when will the Prime Minister push for an extension to Article 50? This is a negotiation with people's livelihoods, not a game against the clock.
This is a negotiation which is of vital importance to the United Kingdom, to our future as global Britain, and which will, with the plan that we have put forward, be about protecting jobs and livelihoods for people across the whole of the United Kingdom. But we are not extending Article 50. We have a negotiation, we have a plan for that negotiation, and we will go to it at pace.
Sir Oliver Heald.
My right honourable friend agree with me that one of the reasons that companies have come to this country, and also that British companies have become involved in integrated European manufacture, is because we've had a settled rule book for more than 30 years about trade in goods. And does she agree with me, and I would like to thank the Cabinet for agreeing to this, that the proposal is right to protect that business and to ensure that we keep those jobs?
Can I say to my honourable friend that he's absolutely right that the rule book in relation to industrial goods has been broadly settled over a number of decades and is not expected to change significantly in the future. It is one to which businesses continue to work to that, and would do so after we have left the European Union. So I think the position we've taken, which protects jobs, is absolutely right.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Can I beg the Prime Minister to think again? It is obvious, even for today's proceedings, all her hard work at Chequers, she actually is still imprisoned by a group of hard Brexit ideologues.
would she change her mind, speak to those who have a real desire for the national interest in withdrawing from the European Union, and take a rather different view, but for having a vote in Parliament on the Chequers Agreement?
I say to the right honourable gentleman that he talks about operating in the national interest. That's exactly what the government is doing. It's exactly why we're putting this proposal forward. We will negotiate with the European Union on the basis of this proposal, and of course, in due course, Parliament will have its opportunity to vote through the meaningful vote and on the withdrawal agreement and implementation bill.
Theresa May.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend refers to negotiations, and of course negotiations is about give and take, and some people may think we have given rather too much, but I'm actually not sure that the European Union will take it. I think they want us to give a little more and a little more. Can I ask that she will recall Parliament over the summer if in those deep and pacey negotiations we are asked to give even more?
Can I say to my honourable friend, although I recognise the good intentions with which she asked that question, I suspect it didn't quite receive the full approval of the entire House.
Liam Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister should have sacked her Foreign Secretary some time ago as someone who put himself before his party. She now risks putting her party before her country. How can she possibly persuade us that she can negotiate with strength with Brussels when it is clear she leads a divided House and she's struggling to take back control of her cabinet, never mind anything else?
The Cabinet has agreed the position that the government is taking forward. He asks about the ability to achieve in negotiations. I simply point out that that is exactly what we have been doing at every stage in these negotiations.
In noticing the honourable gentleman member for Elmet and Rothwell, I note with approval that the bright shirt he's wearing is more reminiscent of Arsenal than of West Ham. Mr. Alex Shelbrook.
Well, thank you for that endorsement, Mr. Speaker. My constituency of Elmet and Rothwell contributes roughly about £500 million to the GDP of this nation through mainly small and medium enterprise manufacturing. My right honourable friend note and comment that indeed, the most important thing we must achieve is that those small medium enterprises, which are the lifeblood of this country, are able to supply the big companies no matter where they're able to trade. And actually, this deal actually allows them to expand in all other parts of the world as well.
Oh, can I say to my honourable friend that that is exactly what this deal does, and also by ensuring that we will have that frictionless trade across the border with the European Union, and in the facilitated customs arrangement we've put forward, we're ensuring that those businesses that currently only trade with the European Union will have no extra requirements in terms of customs, so we're ensuring that we are not increasing the burden on those businesses.
In her initial letter to Donald Tusk notifying the European Commission that she wanted to trigger Article 50, she said that if there was no deal, there would be no deal on security. I don't think she was making a threat. She was simply stating the truth, the fact. But since then, the European Union has made it clear that they're not sure that they want precisely the same version of a security cooperation that we've talked about, and they're now saying we won't be able to be members of the European arrest warrant. Isn't this issue of national security as important as it was the day that she wrote that letter? And isn't it most important that we do get a deal, therefore?
Of course the issue of national security is important, and we want to maintain operational capabilities. We will be, as he will see when the White Paper comes out, in the security partnership that I outlined in my Munich speech and that we're putting further details on, we want to ensure that those operational capabilities through instruments and programmes and agencies are still available to the United Kingdom, and that will be part of the negotiations that we take forward, and a security partnership is an important element of our future relationship.
David Jones.
Could my right honourable friend say what distinction she would draw between a combined customs territory, which the Cabinet appears to consider desirable, and a customs union, which it doesn't?
I'm very happy to answer that question for my right honourable friend. In a customs union, it will be necessary to be part of the common commercial policy, which would not enable us to sign trade deals with other countries around the world. In the arrangement that we've put forward, we will be free to sign trade deals around the rest of the world.
Seema Malhotra.
The government's proposals seem to effectively seek to reproduce parts of the backstop proposal for the whole of the UK, but with a Swiss-style dispute settlement system. But could she answer this question, which is, what will her proposals mean for mutual recognition of health professionals' qualifications in order for health professionals to be able to operate cross-border?
That is one of the areas where, of course, we will be entering negotiations with the European Union. We want to ensure that we are able to see recognition in a number of areas in relation to professionals and professional services. But, of course, that is something that we have to agree with the European Union.
Mr. Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister knows my constituency of Wimbledon well, and they know her. They know her to be a lady of integrity and putting the national interest first. And she's done that in this deal, and I commend her for it. Many of the businesses in my constituency are concerned about non-tariff barriers. Can she confirm that this agreement overcomes their concerns and they'll be free to trade over those non-tariff barriers?
The point of the deal that we have put out and the proposal that we will be presenting to the European Union is that we can have that ability for free trade between the United Kingdom and the remaining EU 27. That's partly about the frictionless borders, but it is also, of course, about the standards and regulations that those businesses will continue to operate to.
Vera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's obviously disagreement in her own party essays, in the Labour Party, as what the people actually voted for in 2016. Isn't it time to clarify with the people themselves, rather than always guessing? And I do not, with respect, Mr. Speaker, accept that it's being said that the people have spoken. This will be a further question to the people once they have the final deal, and they should have the final say on the deal.
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, she talks about disagreement. The biggest disagreement, of course, is between the Liberal Democrats and the people of this country who voted to leave the European Union.
Mr. Kenneth Clark.
Mr. Speaker, may I warmly congratulate my Prime Minister on the progress that she made at the weekend at Chequers and wish her well in the difficult few days that will no doubt lie ahead before we see the further details in the White Paper, I trust. And is she now confident that the leaders of the other 27 European governments involved will accept this as a reasonable starting position for negotiations based on the realities of business and trade in the modern world, and ask them to speed up as far as possible the serious negotiations that must now begin, with no doubt some modest compromises on both sides before we reach a successful conclusion?
Well, can I reassure my right honourable and learned friend that the responses that I've received so far from other European Union leaders are that they have responded positively to the proposals that we have put forward, and indeed at the June European Council, the European Council at 27 agreed that we needed to increase the pace of the negotiations in the future.
Pat McFadden.
Speaker, on the 18th of December, the Prime Minister told the House, and I quote, "We will be going in and negotiating for services and for goods." We trade at an annual surplus of £28 billion in services with the European Union. Why is it, other than the reasons of internal politics and ideology within the Conservative Party, that she has taken the profit-making trade part of the UK economy and thrown it under the Brexit bus?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that that is not correct? What we are doing is ensuring that we have the flexibility in relation to services. As we look around the rest of the world, it will be services that will be a significant element of our trade agreements with the rest of the world. It will be in services that we will be able to benefit. We want that flexibility, and that is precisely what we are negotiating for.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has always been very clear that she seeks a bespoke relationship between the EU and the UK. There are only 9 meetings left at the European Parliament in Strasbourg before we will have left. Can I urge the Prime Minister and members of the Cabinet to keep focused on the timetable and deliver that deal?
Can I thank my honourable friend for pointing that out? We will indeed be focused on the timetable, both in negotiations with the European Union, but also recognising the role the European Parliament will play, because they will need to agree and the withdrawal agreement when it has been finalised.
Mike Gapes.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister
has been struggling quite cleverly within the constraints of her self-imposed chains and red lines. Wouldn't it be a bit easier for her if she acted, as was the case in the 1941 crisis, the way that Clement Attlee acted, and we worked in the national interest together to deal with this crisis? Because carrying on as we are will not succeed, and she knows it.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that the government has put forward a proposal in the national interest, but there are differences across this House. It's been obvious from a number of members of the opposition benches who want us to stay in a customs union, want us to stay in a single market, which in my view would not be keeping faith with the vote of the British people.
John Barron. Generally accepted that the EU has a poor track record on trade deals because, in large part, because of its protectionist rules and regulations. Does the Prime Minister accept that in pursuing a common rule book and promising harmonisation, we would be obliging imports from third countries to abide by those same regulations and therefore make trade deals more difficult to achieve?
Can I say to my honourable friend, as I said earlier, of course we could tear up regulatory standards that we have here in the United Kingdom, but I don't believe that would be the right thing to do, and I don't believe that that would be something that this House would support. Of course, when we look at trade deals around the rest of the world, as in any trade deal, there will be decisions to be taken about the basis on which that trade can go forward and the sort of standards that both sides will apply in those trade deals. But I believe it's right that the United Kingdom maintains a high regulatory standards in a number of areas.
Mrs. Ellen Goodman.
Mr. Speaker. The customs and trade bills were both drafted several months ago. In the Chequers Agreement, the Prime Minister has set out a rather complicated new customs arrangement. Will this need any changes to the legislation that the House is going to be considering next week?
No, I don't believe it will.
Prime Minister. Mr. Crispin Blunt.
It's just over 16 months since the then Foreign Affairs Committee unanimously, Leavers and Remainers together, concluded that in July 2016 we concluded that the previous government's decision not to instruct key departments to prepare for a leave vote in the EU referendum amounted to gross negligence. Making an equivalent mistake would constitute a serious dereliction of duty by the present administration. Does my right honourable friend understand the relief now that the no-deal preparations are going to be overt, and will she ensure that the resources and commitment that may have been absent from these preparations are now given to this very important task to show the steel in our position?
Can I say to my honourable friend that we have, of course, as he I'm sure will know, allocated a significant amount of money, £3 billion over 2 years, £1.5 billion of which I believe has already been allocated to departments to do their work on preparing for leaving the European Union. Of course, some of that work will relate to what might be necessary in getting a deal, and other will be relate to what would be necessary in a no deal. Work has been undertaken by departments already, but we are now stepping up the pace of that work and the intensity of that work.
Mrs. Mary Cray.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday night after the Chequers meeting, she announced unanimous cabinet support and reaffirmed the principle of collective responsibility. After the resignation of 2 of her cabinet today, it now looks like she could have a hat-trick by close of play. So has she appointed a new Foreign Secretary, and if so, who is it?
Well, can I say to the honourable lady that I have actually been in the chamber for quite a time since the resignation of the Foreign Secretary. I will be appointing a new Foreign Secretary in due course.
Mr. Andrew Salu.
In South West Bedfordshire, small businesses are also the lifeblood of our economy. My constituent started his 4 years ago. It turns over 4 million and moves high-value capital equipment across EU-UK borders at short notice on a daily basis. Before Friday, he feared for the future of his business. Friday's agreement gives him hope. I ask her to maintain her resolve to help him and men and women like him across our United Kingdom.
The honourable friend is absolutely right that small businesses form the backbone of our economy, and it is right that we have heard from businesses large and small about their interest in maintaining that frictionless trade across our UK-EU borders, and that is exactly what we will be delivering in this proposal.
West Reading.
Mr. Speaker, there is an air of complete unreality this afternoon, because it should be blindingly obvious from the resignations of the Foreign Secretary and the Brexit Secretary and the constituency of opinion they represent in the government benches that there is no majority in this House for the Chequers deal. It is dead. No European leader ought to take it seriously because it won't pass the House. So the question for the Prime Minister is, when will she finally accept that trying to appease the hard Brexiteers on her own benches will never work, to reach across, but also to accept on these benches we will never vote for a deal that delivers a softer Brexit, yes, on goods, but a hard Brexit on services?
Say to the honourable gentleman that through all of these in these decisions, I have people complaining that I've taken the view of this side of the argument or that I've taken the view of the absolute opposite side of the argument. What I have done is put forward what is in the national interest for the best Brexit deal for Britain.
Andrew Rosindell.
Will the Prime Minister explain to the House how the new UK-EU free trade agreement will ensure that London retains its status as the global trading capital of Europe? But to do that, isn't it best that the rulebook is made in Britain?
To my honourable friend that, of course, if we look at the two areas of goods and services, what is very clear is that those who will be trading with the European Union will continue to operate according to that rulebook in the European Union. Where we do need to ensure that we have that flexibility, and particularly to protect one of the key areas for London, which is the City of London as a global financial centre, providing significant proportion of the debt and equity that underpins business across the European Union, with the risks that that entails here in the United Kingdom. It's right that we have regulatory cooperation with others, but that we are able to have rather more flexibility on services, and that will be good for London.
Angela Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister today has presented a position in relation to the negotiating position arrived at Chequers as an evolution of her Mansion House statement. Most members of this House believe there will have to be further evolution of that position before the House will agree a deal. On that basis, will the Prime Minister agree that it's crucial to keep business in all parts of the economy, services and manufacturing, at the heart of the negotiating process?
I think what is important to keep at the heart of the negotiating process is our duty to deliver on Brexit for the people of the United Kingdom, and also to do that in a way that is smooth and orderly and protects jobs and livelihoods and ensures our commitments to our precious union of the United Kingdom. And that's exactly what the government will be doing.
Heidi Allen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister recognise the overwhelming support she has for the pragmatic and collaborative approach she has taken in outlining these Brexit proposals, taken the lead to find a way forward that shows the sort of compromise needed to bring a divided country back together and crucially safeguard our economy? Because one of the qualities we expect in a Prime Minister is to lead and not quit when the going gets tough.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, it is absolutely the case that on issues like this, what is important is that we come to a decision that I and the government believes is in the UK's national interest and that will deliver a good Brexit deal for the United Kingdom, and that's where our focus is and will continue to be.
Mr. Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has opted, finally, for a high degree of alignment with the European Union. She's right to have done so. The Government and the EU intend that the UK will stay in the large number of international agreements with countries outside the EU covering trade and other areas, but that will require agreement from those non-EU countries. What progress has there been so far in securing that agreement from those countries?
The right honourable gentleman is right in that we are looking to maintain those agreements. Of course, once we're out of the European Union, it will then be possible for us to enhance those agreements, to improve them in negotiation with those countries. Discussions have been held with a number of countries, but also with the European Union, with the European Commission, who have themselves indicated as well that they recognise that this is the right way forward.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Speaker, further to the question by my right honourable friend from Reigate, every single government in every single particular will need to be ready when we leave the European Union, which could possibly be as early as the 29th of March next year. Will my right honourable friend the Prime Minister agree to publish more information so that Parliament can be reassured in this respect?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that we have always been clear that we will keep Parliament informed of what we are doing, and that we have been. One of the things I said in Lancaster House was that we will provide that information generally as and when it is possible to do so. He said, I think, in his question, if we leave in the European Union on the 29th of March 2019, could I just confirm we will be leaving on the 29th of March 2019?
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It may be possible that European leaders welcome this plan simply because it's the first thing to make it onto paper. The Prime Minister talks about sticking to a common rule book for goods, but not for services. But is it not the case that actually goods and services are often combined, particularly in the aerospace industry, which is important in my constituency?
Can I say to the honourable lady, this is not the first time that the government has put something down on paper in relation to proposals for the future, but we have evolved the position from the Mansion House speech that I gave in relation to this area. The industrial goods rule book, if you like to use, as we have used that term, is recognised. It has been stable over quite a number of years, as has been pointed out from the government benches. And it is right, businesses, including the aerospace industry, were very clear that it was that rule book that they wanted to continue to operate by, and that would protect jobs. And that's the reason why we have taken this step.
Yes. Mark Francois.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Brexit Secretary has unfortunately resigned. He, at least in theory, was leading our negotiations with the European Union. For months, his department had been working on a detailed white paper, but that was not presented to the Cabinet at Chequers. They were presented with a different plan. Can I echo the call made earlier from my honourable friend for Harwich in North Essex, that DEXU white paper should now be published so that the House and the country have a chance to see the alternative options which DEXU themselves had proposed?
Can I say to my honourable friend that it was always clear that the white paper, which will be published as a DEXU white paper, would reflect the position of the government, and the white paper that is published next week will do exactly that.
Dr. Rupa Haq.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that even senior members of the government are resigning, DEXU's midnight runners and the Foreign Secretary, because they think that we're heading for a bad Brexit deal, can I suggest to her that at the end of the negotiation she could put herself in a strong position by holding a people's vote on the fight to validate the final deal? What is she scared of otherwise?
I think I've covered this point on a number of occasions, and I think it remains unfortunate that the Labour Party is not willing to rule out a second referendum. This House, this Parliament, overwhelmingly gave the people of this country the decision and the choice as to whether to leave the European Union. They voted. I think the vast majority of the public out there want their government to deliver on that, not to have a second referendum, but to have faith with the British people and deliver on their vote.
Martin Vickers.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents voted 70% for Brexit. In the last 2 years, they've become increasingly frustrated at the progress being made and the concessions that have been made. That frustration is now turning into anger. What can the Prime Minister say to them that will actually reassure them that there will be no further concessions?
Can I say, first of all, to my honourable friend, that I believe the important message to his constituents and to others is that we are delivering on those key issues that I believe led to people voting to leave the European Union. So an end to free movement, no more vast sums of money going to the EU every year, coming out of the CAP and the CFP, out of the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. And he talks about their concerns about the timetable. It is precisely to ensure that we are able to reach the end of our negotiations this autumn, such that we have, where we have a deal, we have those proposals in place by the 29th of March 2019, that we have are presenting this proposal to the European Union. His constituents will see us leave the European Union on the 29th of March 2019.
Stephen Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker, contrary to what the Prime Minister has repeatedly told the House today, the EEA agreement does in fact enable the suspension and reform of free movement of labour, removes the direct effect of EU law and sits outside the jurisdiction of the ECJ. The Chequers proposal, on the other hand, is a bureaucratic nightmare that's riddled with ambiguity and complexity. Why doesn't the Prime Minister stop trying to reinvent the wheel and commit instead to an EEA-based Brexit?
To the honourable gentleman, he might have noticed that this House had an opportunity to vote on the EEA issue within the EU withdrawal bill and voted overwhelmingly against membership of the EEA.
Paul Masterton.
Speaker, can I welcome the agreement reached by the Cabinet last week and urge the Prime Minister to hold firm in the national interest? But would she agree with me that what we have here forms the basis for a good deal for Scotland? Frictionless trade with the European Union out of the common fisheries policy and maintaining and preserving the integrity of the UK's internal market.
I say to my honourable friend, I think he is absolutely right. This will be a good deal for Scotland. Crucially, it does deliver on what I believe Scotland wants, which is coming out of the common fisheries policy. And of course, it maintains the UK's internal market, which is of significant benefit to Scotland and indeed of more consequence to Scotland than its trade with the European Union.
Mr. David Hanson.
The Prime Minister has said clearly in her statement today that she sees an end to the jurisdiction of the Court of Justice of the European Union over the UK's matters. How does she square that with continued membership of the European Arrest Warrant?
We are clear that as we go ahead forward in these negotiations, we will be looking at the question of how we can operate the various operational capabilities that are there in the security arrangement in the future to the benefit of both citizens in both the United Kingdom and in the European Union. But our position in relation to the European Court of Justice remains. And the European Arrest Warrant, of course, changes were made when I was Home Secretary to the operation of that European Arrest Warrant, not under the European Court of Justice's jurisdiction, but under the laws of this country and determined by this House.
Anne-Marie Morris.
Prime Minister, I've listened very carefully to everything that you've said today, and I've read very carefully everything that you have circulated. Indeed, I've even been to one of the briefings that you organised today, and I was struck by the reply from your presenter. Every time there was a question about why we were not going to have something better than was on the piece of paper presented, it was that the EU simply wouldn't agree. I've gone very carefully through everything, and I simply cannot see how what was agreed at Chequers actually does deliver Brexit, to be honest, hard or soft. There's lots of use of indirect instead of direct, but I don't think we've been delivering. Please, I think that people would like you, Prime Minister, to stand up to Mr Barnier and to say no. And I'd like you to bear that in mind when you go through the white paper to look for what you might put in it to make it deliver fruit. Otherwise, Brexit will not deliver the economic dividend it should.
I allowed the Honourable Lady to complete her question, but can I very gently encourage her to remember that we don't use the word you here. She has now been a member for 8 years, and I look to her to set an example to other colleagues, new colleagues, who require leadership. The Prime Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend, it is precisely because we are saying no to the proposals that have been put forward by the European Commission that we are putting forward our own proposal, which is much more ambitious, more comprehensive than those that have come from the European Union, I believe in the best interests of this country.
Pete Wishart.
I don't know if you had a chance to see the breaking news, but apparently there's one going out which is saying that Theresa May will contest any vote of no confidence in her. So can I ask the Prime Minister, does she anticipate such a vote, and who does she think may challenge her?
Can I just say to the honourable gentleman, nice try, but I'm getting on with the job of delivering what the British people want.
Charlie Elphick.
Mr Speaker, can I welcome the Prime Minister's statement that no deal preparations will be stepped up? And can she tell the House what those preparations are, how they'll be stepped up, whether that will include new money, and most importantly, whether it will include the delivery of the lorry park on the roads to the Channel ports that were promised 2 years ago but have not yet been delivered by the Department for Transport?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that, as I said earlier, 1.5 billion of money has already been allocated. The Chancellor made 3 billion available over 2 years for the various preparations, which include the no-deal preparations. It will now be the new Brexit Secretary will be taking on the task of ensuring that we step up those proposals for no deal, that preparation for no deal. I'm going to say to my honourable friend, I know from previous discussions the concern that he has about the potential lorry park in Kent in relation to the port of Dover. He champions the rights of his constituents and the needs of his constituent very eloquently in this House.
Tom Brake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the setback of 4 ministerial resignations and March 2019 bearing down upon us, could I ask the Prime Minister to think again about the extension of Article 50? It would enable her to hold a final say on the deal vote. Now, I know that she's not in favour of that, but it would also enable her to have additional time to secure extended negotiations with the European Union, perhaps a better deal than the one she might be about to secure currently.
Say to the right honourable gentleman, no, we're not going to extend Article 50. We have a timetable. We're working to that timetable. We will leave on the 29th of March 2019.
You're okay.
I'm very well. James Cartledge.
Speaker.
The honourable gentleman doesn't have to look quite so surprised to be called. He was standing. It's very good to know that he knows his own name. I did call him, and the House, and perhaps the nation, wish to hear him. James Cartledge.
So the largest employer in my constituency is Philips Avent Baby Care, which employs 1,500 people. And at the weekend, the chief executive of Philips made clear that in the event of the hard Brexit, that plant could close, which would be a massive shock to my local economy. So can I say to my right honourable friend, there's a lot of excitement about certain jobs being lost in this place. Can I say to her, I will be supporting her negotiating position because it prioritises the jobs that matter, our constituents.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that it is precisely the route that we're taking is a route that delivers on Brexit, delivers on the vote of the British people, but does so in a way that does protect jobs and livelihoods and maintains the other commitments that we have made. And he's absolutely right. People talk about things in this House, but actually it's the jobs of our constituents that we should be concerned about.
Ian Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is in utter chaos on a cabinet agreement that's taken 2 years to achieve, that the EU may never agree to, and barely covers 20% of our economy. So if it's such a good agreement, why has the Prime Minister lost 2 Secretaries of State that were in charge of the Brexit negotiations?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that he claims the agreement that we have reached, that will be reflected in the white paper that will be published later this week, will set out our intentions across the whole of our economy. We made some very specific proposals in relation to industrial goods, but we will cover the other aspects of our economy and the flexibility that we believe is right in those areas for the future.
Donnellan.
Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister confirm that the mobility framework will be part of an immigration system that we control and we deliver for our economic needs, whilst ending the free movement of labour?
I'm happy to give my honourable friend that commitment. We will end free movement. As we come to a trade this agreement with the European Union, of course there will be a question of what would in a trade agreement be a Mode 4 mobility proposal, but we would be looking to ensure that we offer those arrangements around Mode 4 in other trade agreements that we do with the rest of the world as well. But crucially, we will also put in place our own immigration rules in relation to immigration here from the European Union.
Kevin Brennan.
Mr. Speaker, the BBC's political correspondent has tweeted that the 48 letters have been received. Is the Prime Minister certain there'll be no further resignations from her government over this today?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that there is only one interest in jobs that the government has, and that is the jobs of the people of this country and ensuring prosperity for the future.
Helen Whately.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Brexit has divided the country. With that in mind, can I ask my right honourable friend, is it not essential that we pursue a Brexit that is both true to the referendum result and supports the aspirations and incomes of people whose jobs depend on trade with the European Union?
Can I say to my honourable friend that that is exactly the approach the government has taken. We want a smooth and orderly Brexit. We want a Brexit that protects jobs and livelihoods, but we also want to keep faith with the British people and deliver on what the people voted for. That's exactly what we will do.
Prime Minister, it has been argued that the
agreement on the policy which was agreed at Chequers at the weekend was necessary to protect the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom, since it would avoid having to implement the backstop arrangement with the Irish Republic. Is it part of the agreement that the government will be signing a legally binding protocol with the EU which would treat Northern Ireland differently? And if not, why is it necessary to have a divisive future trade arrangement which is designed to protect the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom if that was never in jeopardy?
Say to the honourable gentleman, as I indicated earlier, we have rejected the proposal that the European Union put forward in relation to the protocol. The expectation is that there will be a protocol in the withdrawal agreement, but we have always been clear that we believe that the best resolution of the issue of the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland comes within the overall trading relationship that we develop between the United Kingdom and the EU, and that's exactly what this plan delivers.
Mr. Henry Smith.
Mr. Speaker, in the event that EU negotiators reject the Brexit agreement, can I have an assurance from the Prime Minister that she will rule out any further concessions?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, we have put forward the plan that we believe is the right plan for the United Kingdom. There are, by virtue of it going into negotiation, there are elements of this that we will be negotiating, but we have put forward the plan and the basis on which we believe we can deliver the best Brexit for Britain.
Daniel Zeichner.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has outlined a hard Brexit for services, but she'll know people in the tech sector are concerned because they need to keep up with the changes in the world. Last week in the European Parliament, the Copyright Directive was a hugely important decision in which our MEPs played a huge role and our constituents were able to lobby them. Under her proposals, how will we have that kind of influence in future? Or are we going to be like the Italians watching their football team, or not watching their football team, wondering why their team isn't on the pitch in the World Cup?
Say to the honourable gentleman, he refers to the issue around services. Some of his honourable friends are complaining that we're going to provide ourselves with the flexibility in services precisely to be able to deal with this issue on that more international basis. So I'm really not sure why the position that he is taking on this. I think it is right that we will have greater flexibility in relation to services for the future. And of course, many of the issues that we're dealing with in services are dealt with on that international basis rather than the European basis.
John Penrose.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has rightly been consistent since her Lancaster House speech onwards in promising to deliver the three freedoms of reclaiming control of our laws, our borders and our money. Much of this deal does that. Could she, though, expand a bit more on how we are going to square those promises with a shared rulebook on traded goods, and whether or not we are still delivering on those three freedoms she delivered?
Can I say to my honourable friend, yes, I believe we are still delivering on the promises that we have made. We won't be sending those vast sums of money to the European Union every year. We will be able to use that money, that Brexit dividend as it's been called, to put money into our public services, and I've already indicated what we will be doing in relation to the National Health Service. The jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice will end in the United Kingdom, and in relation to the question of our borders, we will have control of our borders because we will be deciding, we will be setting the rules for immigration for here in the United Kingdom.
Chris Stevens.
Brexit Secretaries on the record on public views on scrapping the Agency Workers Directive and TUPE regulations. Can the Prime Minister tell me what confidence should my constituents have that these regulations will be maintained post-Brexit?
His constituents across the country can have the confidence in a government that has been very clear that we will not be reducing the standards in relation to workers' rights. Indeed, this is a government that is pledged to enhance workers' rights, and that's precisely why we asked Matthew Taylor to do the report on new forms of employment, so that we can ensure that workers' rights and legislation around employment is keeping pace with the changing employment market.
Mr. Nigel Evans.
Prime Minister, I don't religiously read every tweet that emanates from the hands of President Trump, so I don't know what his views are on the Chequers deal, but the Prime Minister is meeting him later this week. Will she be discussing the exciting potential for trade deals with the USA, and does she believe that there is anything in this Chequers deal that could possibly inhibit that trade deal?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that I'm sure that trade will be one of the issues that I discuss with President Trump, and as indeed will other key issues like security and defence. As he knows, the United States are our longest standing and deepest security and defence partner. This arrangement, this proposal that we're putting forward, what we're presenting the EU with, does enable us to sign trade deals around the rest of the world. But I would just caution honourable members that of course, when any trade deal is being signed, the United Kingdom will take a decision as to what standards it wants to continue to abide by, and will make decisions as to whether those standards will be changed, those standards will be torn up, or the trade deal will be affected by that decision. But that will be a decision for us here in the UK.
Yeah. Dr. Lisa Cameron.
Many thanks, Mr. Speaker. The UK's textile and fashion industry contributes £28 billion annually, and textiles are a significant contributor to our Scottish economy. As chair of the all-party group on textiles and fashion, the industry is concerned about passporting of goods, but also of highly specialist services. So how does the plan protect creative industry services? Will she do this and ensure no fashion faux pas going forward?
Can I say to the honourable lady, when she sees the white paper that will be published later this week, will see that it will cover this issue of the creative industries.
The honourable gentleman, I can't believe the honourable gentleman, the member for Gloucester, is standing here, was absent from the chamber for some considerable period of time, but maybe he was waiting for the next statement. I don't know. Jeremy Lefroy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. May I join my right honourable friend in paying tribute to our right honourable friends for House of Price and Howden and Wickham on all the work they did on the EU withdrawal bill and much else, and also to our right honourable friend for Uxbridge and Ruislip for all the work he's done in representing the United Kingdom, and I would pay particular tribute to his work in Africa. Could I thank her and ask how the association agreement, which is being put forward from the Chequers Agreement, will ensure that we put national security, economic prosperity and indeed our United Kingdom at the heart of our negotiating objectives?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and can I also say it gives me the opportunity to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Wickham, for the very hard work that he put in on the EU withdrawal bill. He did a very good job in relation to that legislation. It is the point of the association agreement is that it provides a framework within which it is possible to set the various other agreements that we come to on trade, on security, and do exactly what my honourable friend has referred to in making sure that the deal we're putting forward is the right one for the UK.
Susan Ellen-Jones.
Mr. Speaker, over the past few weeks, we've seen the great concerns of major manufacturing companies, of farmers and of the service sector in North Wales at the government's approach towards Brexit. These aren't people with a political axe to grind in any way. They are deeply, deeply concerned about jobs and our economy. What confidence do we have that the government and the Prime Minister will listen to them, bearing in mind that this deal that was agreed round the Cabinet table is unravelling as we speak and is very, very unlikely to secure any agreement anywhere?
Honourable lady, that we have precisely been listening to manufacturers, to businesses, to farmers, to others up and down the country who provide jobs, and that is precisely why we have come forward with a proposal which delivers on Brexit but does so in a way that protects jobs and livelihoods.
Mr. Ian Stewart.
Welcome the decision to seek membership of a Trans-Pacific Partnership. Can my right honourable friend give me some indication of the value to the UK economy of such a membership? And has she received any indication from any of the other signatories that there is anything in the Chequers Agreement that would inhibit UK membership?
Can I say to my honourable friend that the opportunity to join the TPP is something that my right honourable friend, the Trade Secretary, has been championing. I think since he came into office, he's been very clear on that particular issue. And we are clear, and indeed the Prime Minister of Australia this morning said that he welcomed the interest that the United Kingdom was showing in the TPP, and we would, as we looked at the Chequers agreement, we were one of the things we looked at was would it enable us to join the CPTPP, and it would.
Justin Madders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know on Friday night the entire Cabinet supported the Prime Minister's position, but as of today, that's no longer the case for two of her now former colleagues. Can the Prime Minister advise us what further information has come to light in the intervening period to cause those colleagues to change their minds?
To the honourable gentleman that the Chequers agreement remains as it was, as the agreement that we took on Friday. I did indicate collective responsibility at that time, and two members of the Cabinet have chosen to stand down.
Mr. Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to pursuing accession to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would give us the opportunity to have closer trading links with some of the world's fastest-growing economies. Could she seize the moment with President Trump here this week to raise the question as to whether the United States of America might also reconsider its relationship with the proposed TPP?
I say to my honourable friend that I think we will take this one stage at a time. I think let us focus the United Kingdom on its membership of the TPP, and maybe that would give a message to the United States.
Deirdre Brock.
Speaker, the Prime Minister spoke of maintaining high regulatory standards. However, just a week or so, a few weeks ago, her DEFRA Cabinet Secretary's proposal for a post-Brexit environmental regulatory body contained no watchdog powers to bring legal action, nor commitments to enshrine current environmental principles such as precautionary and polluter pays. How will her government ensure those high regulatory standards are fully protected?
To the honourable lady, it doesn't require separate bodies to ensure that the government is delivering on high environmental standards. This is something the government is committed to, and she will see us continuing to do so.
Chris Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chequers Agreement delivers on the result of the referendum. It also lays the foundation for future trade, and anyone with the nation's interests truly at heart should support it. But when it comes to European negotiations, does the Prime Minister agree that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, and therefore we're not going to be signing the £39 billion cheque until we get some very strong assurance that the Chequers Agreement, or something very similar to it, will be agreed to?
Can I say to my honourable friend, of course, it was the European Union themselves that have used this phrase, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And we are very clear as a government that at the time when we come to the finalisation of the withdrawal agreement, we need not only to have sufficient detail on the future relationship, but also have a linkage between these two. This is a package. These are not separate issues.
Paul Sweeney.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister must now know that her fate is inextricably tied to the success or failure of her maximum facilitation proposal on customs. And I can understand that she's been so eager to go and solicit the views of the other EU 27 member states on the proposal at this stage. So can she answer the question about how many member states has she consulted with at this stage, and is she confident they'll continue to support the idea at the next round of negotiations, given that her own Cabinet has failed to support it over the last 24 hours?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, we have put forward a facilitated customs arrangement. I suggest that he looks at the details of the various models that were proposed, and he'll see that his question was not entirely factually correct. But we will be, of course, negotiating these matters with the European Union.
Andrew Bridgen.
Can my right honourable friend confirm that her Chequers proposals would prevent the mutual recognition of standards, even with highly developed countries such as the United States of America, Australia and New Zealand, effectively ruling out free trade agreements?
It would not prevent free trade agreements with those countries. There is a challenge for us in relation to the United States and standards. We support and have always supported a single standards model. Of course, the United States has a different approach in terms of having multiple standards approach, so that would be an issue for us. But this deal enables us to sign trade deals around the world.
Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, Prime Minister, fishing is so very important across all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. My constituency of Strangford, as you know, voted to leave. In the village of Portavogie, almost to a man and almost to a woman, they want out of the EU. So can the Prime Minister reassure this House that we will have control of our fishing waters, of quotas, of days at sea, an unfettered free fishing sector that we control in our hands in this House?
Did you not read the paper?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I can give him the reassurance we will come out of the common fisheries policy, we will be an independent coastal state. It will then be for us to negotiate in the normal annual negotiations that take place in relation to access to waters and our fishermen's access to other waters, but we'll be doing that as an independent coastal state.
Dr Matthew Offord. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether under her proposals, including the Common Rule Book, that the United Kingdom will be able to ban live animal exports and also introduce other animal welfare standards we're currently prevented from because of our membership of the European Union?
We would be able to enhance the standards that we have here, but we would have committed to that rule book on a number of areas. In relation to the area of agriculture and agri-foods, there are different levels of rules that operate at the moment. What we're talking about in relation to the Common Rule Book is on sanitary and phytosanitary, and there are various other aspects, including CAP, that this does not relate to.
Mark Pawsey.
Mr Speaker, I wonder if I could just first congratulate and thank the Prime Minister, who's had a few busy days but has managed to be at the dispatch box for the past best part of the past 2 hours. So thank you, Prime Minister. But I'm just wondering if the Prime Minister could confirm that this is a good and positive arrangement for business and jobs by establishing a free trade area which will enable the frictionless trades that's so important to manufacturers operating just-in-time supply chains such as automotive and aerospace, while at the same time providing the flexibility to pursue trade opportunities around the world.
Yes, it's precisely, we wanted to ensure two things. First of all, we were able to continue to have a good trading relationship with the European Union in future, but also that we would be able to do those trade deals around the rest of the world. The proposals we've put forward for the frictionless trade does exactly what my honourable friend says and ensures that we maintain those integrated supply chains and the jobs that rely on them.
Tom Purseglove.
Well, Mr Speaker, one of the key reasons that people voted to leave in Corby was to have a proper trade defence instrument set up in this country so that we could take the right steps in the circumstances when we need to protect our industries against unfair dumping on our market. Will that be the case under this setup?
Yes, and when the White Paper is produced, my honourable friend will be able to see the arrangements that will be put in place for trade remedies and sanctions.
Matt Warman.
My constituents voted more than any other to leave the European Union, and what they say to me today is, please, can we just get on with it? This deal that was negotiated at Chequers delivers on bringing decisions on immigration, on money and law back to this House. Please, will the Prime Minister get on with it and urge the European Union to get on with it?
Yeah. Well, I'm very happy to agree with my honourable friend, and I hope and expect that we will now see a greater pace in the negotiations, a greater intensity in the negotiations, because we want to ensure that we achieve that October deadline in coming to an agreement.
Huddleston.
Mr Speaker, can the Prime Minister confirm that services make up nearly 80% of the UK economy, yet there never has been and probably never will be a properly functioning single European market in services, probably one of its greatest failures? Isn't taking a flexible approach to services therefore eminently sensible?
Can I thank my honourable friend for his comments and for pointing out what seemed to be a fact that had evaded a number of the Labour Party questioners today, in precisely that there is not that single services market in the European Union. It is right that we take a flexible approach. That's in our interests.
Dr Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Two-thirds of my constituents in Sleaford and North Wycombe voted for Brexit. And whilst they are supportive of getting on with the job of getting out of the EU, they look for reassurance of one aspect in particular of the proposed Chequers Agreement, which is the Common Rule Book for Goods and Agri-Food, agriculture and food being a large part of my constituency. Can the Prime Minister confirm what options will be open for us if we don't agree to any aspect of that rule book, and who is writing the rules in the future?
It is important that it will be open to Parliament to make decisions. If any rules change in this Common Rule Book, it will be for this Parliament to determine whether or not it wishes to adopt those new rules. It will, of course, be but there will be potentially a consequence depending on the nature of any changes that are made. But that's precisely why I say that it will be Parliament that will be determining our laws in the future.
Steve Double.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware that these proposals go further than many of us and indeed many voters would like to see us go, and are at the absolute limit of what many of us will feel we're able to agree to. So would she reassure the House and indeed the voters in my constituency that when she presents this deal to the EU, she will make absolutely clear that there is very little room for any further concessions, and that rejection of this deal by the EU is likely to result in a no-deal outcome?
Can I say to my honourable friend that I recognise as we look at this issue, I have been determined to ensure that we can both, as I've said earlier, protect jobs and livelihoods, but also deliver on what people voted for, which is leaving the European Union, and crucially those three issues of control of borders, money and laws. This proposal does indeed deliver on that. That is why the government is putting it forward. We believe it is a good proposal, and I look forward to negotiating it with the European Union.
Alex Chalk.
It's easy to talk about Brexit, but the Prime Minister has got to deliver it. Does my right honourable friend agree that the Chequers proposals balance securing jobs in vital sectors like Gloucestershire's aviation supply chain whilst delivering on the promise of an enterprising and independent trade policy?
Can I thank my honourable friend and say to him that, of course, there are many theories about Brexit and the type of Brexit that we should have, but he's absolutely right. What we are doing is delivering a practical Brexit in reality, and we should all have concern for the jobs and livelihoods of our constituents as we do that.
Sir Peter Bottomley.
Can my right honourable friend assure our European partners and our international partners that she and her cabinet colleagues have the overwhelming support of the majority of this party, of this House and of the people of this country in moving forward in the way that the White Paper will suggest?
He has shown for this. I think it is important that we now move forward together as one country, very clear in what we want to see in our future relationship with the European Union, and go into the negotiations with that confidence.
Well, I'm most grateful to the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and all 95 backbenchers who question the Prime Minister. Whatever people think about this matter, the Prime Minister has clearly scored highly today in terms of productivity. We can be clear about that. In statement, the Secretary of State for the Home Department. Thank you. Secretary of State for the Home Department, Secretary Sajid Javid.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement updating the House on recent developments in Salisbury and Amesbury. As I